Yes.
All right, welcome back everybody. So on Thursday we closed with defining what RSA signatures are doing. And I want to get through the math to explain to you how this works and, well, get to the final step to show that it works. So I left out a little bit why we want electronic signatures in the first place. So the main application that you see basically every day when you go to a web page with HTTPS, then you see there's a certificate saying, for instance, you go to my homepage, you go to https://tanja/teaching/cs17 for seeing this homepage for the course, and then you click on the lock, and it says, okay, well, this encryption is this connection is properly encrypted, and then you want to see more. So then you're asking, like, okay, why should I trust this page? Of course, you should trust anything I'm doing, so that sounds great. But how can you be sure that that page is actually for me? I mean, I'm sending you to this page, but maybe somebody took down my server overnight and substituted his computer. And suddenly it says 3 bonus points for everybody. Sounds good, so you want to believe it, but maybe you want to check first. Speaking of things too nice to be true, I don't know whether all of you saw it, the first week after New Year's, so the first week after New Year's is free anyway, the first week after that, I'm not doing classes, I'm doing classes in the repetition week. That is actually from my webpage, and that is true. So you have one extra week. Probably you have other courses, so no skiing holidays, but I will not be that week in between. I will be here the week after. Now, back to crypto parts. Certificates, somebody else approves that this is really my computer. So if you go to my computer, you will see there is a signature from something called Let's Encrypt. And that is a so-called certification authority, or CA. So that is some higher level agency that has gotten the right to issue certificates, and it has given me one for this homepage. And only my computer has the secret signing key, or has the secret keys that belong to the site, and then the certificate links the public key to my webpage. So the certificate, for instance, from Let's Encrypt, this signs the public key to my webpage. And this Let's Encrypt here is in general some certification authority. Now, of course, how do you know that Let's Encrypt is the right thing? There's a so-called certificate chain. So Let's Encrypt has been approved by somebody else. So Let's Encrypt is one of many different authorities. If you go to the web page of the TUE, then you see TENA is a certification authority. And all of those are under the authority of, well, conglomeration of root CAs. So there is one higher level and so you're getting a certificate chain. Something signing Let's Encrypt signing me, and then me signing everything that goes from my webpage. So typically, my webpage, or any webpage, has a static signing key, and then depending on how it is set up, so far we're seeing RSA encryption today. For instance, it might have an RSA encryption key. It can also have something we see next week, or no, Thursday, called Diffie-Hellman keys. So those are more variable keys. But the signature key is typical typically fixed. So the certificate chain of 3 signatures and that leads to you trusting the authenticity of the web page. Another typical example is passports. If you have an electronic passport, then, well, you're all young enough that if you have a passport at all, it is an electronic one. Then there's a little antenna in there with a chip, and the chip contains pretty much all the information that also the physical sheet had. So it has your name, it has your date of birth, your nationality. It normally has an encoding of your picture. And then depending on the country, it also has fingerprints. And now if you want to fake a passport, then you also have to fake this electronic information. Now so far, you could just take the picture out, substitute with your own picture, and just write it back to the chip. So to avoid this, the governments are using signatures on the passport. So there's a signature by, say, the Netherlands saying, okay, this is the information, this is a citizen of this country, signed, stamped, etc. So this is again kind of a certification where the signature is ensuring that yes, it is a person from a certain country, and so it gives you a right to do something, and it's also ensuring the integrity. So signatures ensure integrity of data. And then they also give kind of the permission to say, okay, this is a Dutch person. So in general, we call such things an attribute. And in this case, the attribute is a nationality. And say this is authentic. And then when I brought up signatures, I said, well, when you do UDP, it might have asked you, do you want to sign this message? So then it's really like a signature in the normal sense of contracts, or you just put your name under a letter saying, yep, this is what I mean. Sign to, well, basically signed letter. So this is a normal understanding. Now many of those things seem familiar from what we've done when we introduced message authentication codes. So signatures and MACs have many things in common. Both signatures and MACs are supposed to ensure the authenticity and the integrity of messages. But one is living in the world of symmetric cryptography, one is living in the world of public key cryptography. So some things you can interchange them, and for some things you want one or the other. So MACs and signatures share functionalities and then we're going to list the differences. So a signature allows you to prove to anybody that something is authentic. So a signature living in the public key world means you give me a signature, then I can go to you and say, hey, you can verify this is really from him. I'm not just making this shit up, this is really from him. And then you get his public key, you verify the math, and then you are convinced that this came from him. With a Mac, well, we might have been sharing a key, but anything that he could have a message authentication code on, I could have done myself. So a Mac doesn't prove anything about who of the two parties is doing it. So symmetric cryptography, as the name indicates, is really, really symmetric here. For Mac, there's no way of distinguishing the two sides of the communication. Both have exactly the same authentication key, so both of them can produce the same authenticator. And there's no way of telling a third party which of the two parties it was to do it. A third party can be convinced it can either be him or me, but if it's something that neither of us would want to acknowledge that we did this, then I will blame it on him, he'll blame it on me, and, well, can't convince the third party. So, signatures prove authenticity and integrity to third parties. So this is what you really want if you have a contract that you want to enforce in a legal setting. Also, all of these applications are listed up there. Let's skip PGP for the moment, but the other two. Certificates should be the same for everybody. There's a thing called certificate transparency, where people who are concerned that maybe somebody is man in the middling their connection, say you're sitting on the train and the train company turns evil today, then they might make your browser, or send your browser to some fake web page. And they might also take all of your communication and change something, and then send it to somewhere else. Now this somewhere else is not quite my home page, but it still has a certificate for that thing. And then the train company in the middle is taking that page and replacing it for my web page. At that point, you would like to upload your certificate that you're seeing now and compare with other people who are also seeing a certificate for my page. And then they would go like, ah, this is strange. So maybe we shouldn't trust DigiNotar. So DigiNotar was a certification agency here in the Netherlands that was hacked at some point. And then DigiNotar certificates started to appear for Google or for Gmail and were used against Iranian dissidents. So some Iranian guy goes to Gmail thinking, okay, this is my normal Gmail, sees a valid certificate. Now this comes from DigiNotar because somebody hacked into it. And then it's not actually the Gmail, but it's some fake web page. And then he enters his credentials there. They kind of do some stuff in the background so that he gets to his email, but now they have his login information. Now at that point, him checking that this is still the same certificate that he saw yesterday, or that it's the same certificate that somebody else in a different country sees, is very important. So certificate transparency is trying to make a collection of all certificates. So when people contribute, they say, well, whatever web page they visit, they take the certificate and upload it to a central server. And then for some machines, it's normal. Say big companies have a different server in each continent, so you might see some different certificates there. Say you see the European version, you see the US version, but then at least you know which country you're in, and you see the 5 different versions. Or maybe they make it less obvious and have one certificate that they share. But if you suddenly get a totally different certificate, then you probably are under attack. That's not always the case. For instance, if you notice that your wireless here at Eindhoven is changing certificates, they actually do change certificates every once in a while, and then they try to announce it, and they don't do a particularly good job. But one of these days, certificates here in Eindhoven for Edinburgh and for the Wi-Fi will change. Service announcement. Passports also wouldn't be good if this was a thing between you and the country, because you actually want to convince the border official, a third party, that this is a valid passport. So many things where you want to have this third party. There's another feature, formal contracts, certificates. There's another feature which we haven't stated here. It's authenticity, integrity, and there's another third feature which is called non-repudiation. That means you cannot deny having signed something. You're the only person who has the secret key for your signature. If something is signed by you, it must have been you. So signatures also provide non-repudiation. So the signer cannot deny having signed a message. And of course then you could say, oh, but I lost my key, and I put it on a phone booth, or I put it on a pinboard. If you claim that you lost your secret key, then other people can sign. But then you also lost your secret key. So except for losing the secrecy of your secret key, nobody else could have signed it. So a signature really nails you to something. So Max only convince the other side. So the other party in the communication So if the two of us have a shared secret, we have an encryption key, we have an authentication key. Now, I assume that only us have these, nobody else. You all are the attackers, you're of course trying to get those, but if I assume that our systems are good, then I have trust that nobody else has this authentication key. So if I receive something which has a valid authenticator, has a valid MAC, then, well, I could be schizophrenic, or lost memory, and I signed a MAC this yesterday, but probably this came from it. So chances are very good that this is valid. It is totally convincing for me. I look at this message, well, I didn't send this, so the only other party who has this key was him, so this is a valid MAC. Any of you, no chance. Now, if he says the most horrendous thing, I want to go, you like that. Did you hear that? Like he would claim, no, Tanja said that. This is like, okay, one of the parties says, let's kill the president. If I go to the police saying he says, let's kill the president, sorry, you're a good guy, would never do that, but I need somebody in the back of the audience so that everybody hears it. If I have this encrypted and authenticated, well, MAC'd string saying, let's kill the president, and I go to the police can say, well, maybe it was him, but maybe it was me. So he has full repudiation for that one. He can totally say, no, that wasn't me, it was somebody else. And sometimes this is exactly what you want. You want to communicate with somebody, and the two of you want to be sure that you're talking to one another, but only for the duration of the conversation. You don't want anybody to go outside after this and say, hey, look, this person said something. So if you're having a chat program called Jabber or XMPP, then you can have an extra plugin called OTR, off the record. And what off the record is doing is exactly this. You're doing, for each conversation, you're doing some ephemeral encryption keys. Ephemeral means you only use it for that communication and then you forget about it. And so for this communication, you have an encryption key symmetric, you have an authentication key symmetric. You encrypt and MAC everything that goes through, so it does check all the time that both parties are still alive and encrypting, decrypting. And at the end of the conversation, you should burn the keys. Never use those again. OTR even goes one step further, which is well, we cryptographers like to think that we could explain to a judge all the crypt that we're doing. There are very few judges where this is true, but, well, we still live in this utopia that, well, if we prove that it's impossible, then people will believe us. So OTR goes one step further, and at the end of the conversation, publishes the authentication key. So that not just me and him have authentication key, but any of you has authentication key. So at the end of this, any of you could say, hey, Tanja says let's kill the president. Look, here's an authenticator on it. And then I would say, yes, Your Honor. However, I published that. Any of these people could have been it. We hope that judges would understand this. Probably not. So when you use OTR, it's probably the best thing you can do. But don't rely on the, oh yes, well, we published the authentication key afterwards and therefore it's all fine. So Max only convinced the other part in communication. Cannot implicate anybody. So either A or B could have produced the MAC. And we often speak of a message authentication code, and then we say it's a tag, so because it's like you have the encrypted message and you tag on this part. You put this authenticator at the end. So both of them put it down this. So OTR off the record. In Jabber XMPP. Uses Max. So the thing about off the record is when you say this is on the record, this is off the record means nobody is allowed to attribute this to you. And the idea of this thing is to make this cryptographically enforced that it's off the record. Because nobody could afterwards say, hey, this is really from the other part. Okay, so this was the situation for signatures. Now public key encryption. So we have, when you specify a system, you always need 3 algorithms. You need key generation, that's the same as in signatures. You also need a system generating keys. And then you need an encryption and a decryption function. You need to specify three algorithms, namely key generation, encryption, and decryption. So the key gen typically takes a security parameter, like how many bits you want, how secure it should be, and not anything else. Or sometimes it takes some general domain parameters. And then outputs your secret key and public key. So it takes security level, domain parameters, and domain parameters, and outputs public key, PK, and secret key, SK. I didn't do this formal setup, but if you do the same formal setup for signatures, then this will be the same for signatures. And then the encrypt and the decrypt, well, do the obvious things. So for RSA encryption, and I remember that quite a few people showed hands when I said who has seen this, but well, you can't make a crypto course, we don't even explain RSA encryption. So those of you who have seen it, at least take that we do somewhat more formal definitions. Those of you who haven't seen it, it's not going to be too different from the signature. For RSA, it's kind of exceptional that encryption and signatures are very closely related. For the other example, which we'll see about public key encryption, they're quite separate. So RSA keygen is pretty much the same as for the signatures. So pick 2 primes P not equal to Q, and then we take in some security parameter, and in this case the security parameter tells us how many bits you want. And there is some lambda running around, so lambda bits. There are bad ways of picking primes. Asking your computer to say next prime after 2 to the lambda is not a good idea in general, because if I do this and you do this, then we have a shared prime there, and that wouldn't be quite secure. So when I say pick 2 primes, I really mean randomly. And then just before, pick E with GCD of E and phi of P times Q equal to 1. Well, I could already, yeah, sure. I want my n, so put n equals P times Q. So I could write phi of n here. If E is such a nice thing, and normally, I said already that we want some special E's, we don't just want any random E, particularly like 3, 5, 7, or 3, 7 is okay, 17 is nicer, and then 6, 5, 5, 3, 7. There's a bunch of E's that we like. If you have a random E, that's usually suspicious. And then we compute D, which is common to E to the minus 1 mod phi of n. So it's really the same steps as in the signature generation, signature key generation. So then we output the public key, which is N and E, and the secret key, which is N and P. And then the encryption function is, we're given M, and has to be less than n, else this will not be unique, because we're going to do all the computation for n. If your n is 1,000 and you're trying to encrypt 1,005, that's going to be mapped to 5. So the messages 5 and 1,005 are indistinguishable if your modulus, the n, is 1,000. So this is just to ensure functionality. So given n equals n, less than n, compute C congruent M to the E mod N, and then decrypt is given C compute M, well, let's call this M prime, which is C to the D mod N. And then the same computation that we did on Thursday for the signatures to show that a signature which is properly generated is also valid, shows also here that M prime is actually equal to M. So M prime is congruent to M mod N. The same computation as in the signature part. And again, this is the schoolbook version. And as I promised, we'll see today why that's a bad idea. Also, said that already, so RSA is unusual in that signing is about the same as decrypting, and verify about the same as encrypt. That is normally not the case. So don't go into an exam or any workplace or whatever you ever asked to explain public key encryption signatures and say, oh yeah, encryption is the inverse of signatures. That's not good. Yes, for RSA, when you look at these functions, then the decryption uses a secret key in exactly the same way that you would have used the secret key in the signature generation. And yes, encryption uses the public key in exactly the same way as the verification would have used it. But this is just a quirk of RSA. This is not a general thing. If somebody asks you to build a signature system out of an encryption system, it is not just changing the rules of those things.